Good evening. Welcome to our webinar. We will start in 1 or 2 minutes. Almost ready. Thank you for joining us.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. Welcome to our exciting travel lecture on Africa. Whether you have traveled with us before or you're just now learning about us, we are so thrilled that you have taken the time out of your night to join us. My name is Emily. I'm the social media manager for Hazen Jarvis, and I will be co-hosting our webinar tonight. Before we dive in, for those of you who are new to us, once again, welcome. We are so pleased to have you. We are Hazen Jarvis. We have over 70 years of experience offering personalized, award-winning holidays to more than 60 destinations across the globe. We operate in many, many parts of our beautiful world, as you can see on the map here on the next slide. We recently launched South Korea, really new, exciting destination to our portfolio. And we would love to know, when are you planning your next trip? Which of these destinations are on your own bucket list? So I'm going to launch a poll here in Zoom. Would love to hear from all of you, so please do take a look and submit your response. All right, while you complete the poll, I would like to quickly cover some housekeeping items for our virtual journey. First off, please know this webinar is being recorded and all of you will receive a link to the recording via email. Please know this recording will not capture your name, your video, your audio, or any of your personal data. Throughout the webinar, please feel free to utilize the chat for any technical issues that you might have. Please also utilize the chat to send any questions that come up for you throughout the webinar, and we will address them in the end in a Q&A session. But again, you're welcome and encouraged to submit your questions as we go. All right, thank you for participating in our first poll. We will have a couple more polls as we go. This poll information, it's very helpful for us to understand you all as your guests and your desires. So thank you so much for taking the time to fill that out. Now we will dive into tonight's content. I'm so excited to introduce Florian Keller, our Chief Customer and Sustainability Officer, who will be leading you on our virtual journey. Florian has really incredible firsthand experience in Africa. He's lived there for over 20 years, so brings a wealth of knowledge to the table. Florian, go ahead and take it away.
Yes, thank you, Emily, and good evening from Nairobi in Kenya. I've just seen in the poll that many of you are interested in traveling to Africa, and of course, I assume not surprisingly, that's the reason why you're here. So welcome to Africa, to this journey through Africa. From one of the iconic safari destinations here, Kenya. The house that you see behind me, some of you will actually may find that familiar. That's the house where the movie Out of Africa was shot, which has been my home for more than 15 years, but still here in Nairobi, and excited to take you on this journey through Africa, following the footsteps of the explorers. So what I would like to do is start out by give you a little bit of context on the explorers, Livingstone and Stanley, and what they did, and why they did what they did, and then take you on a journey following the places that they explored, they came through, and actually show you what they look like today. So we are basically using Stanley and Livingstone and Stanley as we're following their footsteps through Africa. And this is, of course, the African continent as we all know it today. This is the map of Africa. But if you had lived 400 years ago, this is what it would have looked like. Yeah, this is what we knew of Africa you see here in 1630. And basically, as you can see, we had a glimpse of the outline of the continent and the coastal places, because there was trade along the African shore. So people the traders would stop along the shore, but they wouldn't really venture inland. In this map, you see some probably hypothetical features of what people in those days felt Africa probably looks like. And what you can see here already is there was this mysterious source of the Nile. Of course, as Europeans were and especially the British were in Egypt already in those years, and the Nile was, you know, the giver of life of the northern African continent. And the question was, where does the Nile come from? But no one really knew. But of course, everyone knew that somewhere on this African continent. You see here hypothetically where people drew in this map where they believed it might be. So now skipping 200 years on, 1850, was what the African map looked like then. And you can see it's already getting more accurate, more closely to what it is today. We had already, you know, Madagascar here, and you can see people started to venture into the continent a bit more. And, you know, ironically, a lot of you know, what was known beyond just the coastal areas was actually a result of slave trade in those years, because it was the slave traders who were the first to venture into the continent and came back with a sense of what is in there. But still, a lot of terra incognita, a lot of unknown places in the interior of Africa. And this is really when David Livingstone came onto the plan. And what drove him initially was the desire to bring as many you know, Africans to Christian faith. So he was a missionary, and he came to Africa in 1841. He was 28 years old, and he came to Cape Town. And he set out from Cape Town into along the South African coast to Port Elizabeth, what's today the Garden Route. And from there, he went inland into what is today the Kalahari Desert. You know, Botswana is here. And he spent almost 10 years here trying his luck as a missionary. And he was, from the accounts that I read, spectacularly unsuccessful as a missionary. I think I read somewhere that you could count the number of souls he brought to the faith on one hand. So he probably recognized at some point, that's probably not really my calling, or that's not really what I'm particularly good at. And the other thing that he experienced while he was a missionary was the devastation of slave trade. So he actually experienced what it did to the local people, and that's where his second calling came. His thought then was, let me open or contribute to open up the African continent for commerce and create an alternative for slave trade. And that's what the remainder of his life really was about. So in 1853, he started out on the first crossing of the African continent from east to west. So he wanted to link the Atlantic Ocean to the Indian Ocean without knowing what we know, of course, what he was going to see. So he was here in today's Botswana, and he went towards the Atlantic Ocean, came out where today is Angola, about 2 years or a year later. And so he had now reached the Atlantic. Now he wanted to find a trade route from the Atlantic to the Indian Ocean. So he ventured in 1855 backtracked here and then continued. And along the way, he was the one who discovered Victoria Falls, the first African person who really saw the majesty of Victoria Falls. And then he was on the Zambezi River. So now he followed the Zambezi River, and he guessed quite rightly, eventually the Zambezi River will end up in the Indian Ocean. And it took him about a year and a half until, actually, no, it's much longer, until 56. So a year and a half until it reached the Indian Ocean. And that gave him quite some fame. You know, in those days, you know, Europeans, followed what was happening in the colonies, and that was a major thing, opening up the African continent. So he was able to secure funds to continue his quest to open up the African continent, because the one thing that he realized, the Zambezi River is not navigable. It is not a river that really is usable for commerce. So he realized, I haven't really accomplished my goal. I have to continue looking for a way to open up trade routes. And you can see here for about 6 years, he followed the Zambezi and explored this area. He wasn't really successful with regards to finding a trade route, but he was, as a result of that, the first person who actually found or came to Lake Malawi. Today's Lake Malawi, then it was called Lake Nyasa. And again, it brought him quite some fame, even though not the success he wanted. And then the next thing on his quest was to find the source of the Nile. And the source of the Nile in those days became like a mythical thing to find. And part of the reason was that whoever controlled the Nile had control over Egypt. Because they had control over the water, the upper reaches of the Nile. You could control whatever happened in Egypt, and that was vitally important for Britain at that time. So he started in 1866 looking for the source of the Nile. He didn't really know where it is, and I'll get to that in a moment. And you can see he was really meandering around. He came to today's Lake Tanganyika on the border between Tanzania and Congo, and he never really made it to Lake Victoria, where the source of the Nile is. And then in 1870, he disappeared. And that brought, and up to that point, you'd always have, when you were on an expedition, you'd have like a runner who would go back and brought news back to civilization. But then suddenly those news didn't come anymore. And the world, in those days, Livingstone was probably as famous as anyone could be. And, the world asked itself, where is Livingstone? And that brought Henry Morton Stanley on the plan. And he was a very different kind of explorer. He wasn't driven by missionary zeal. He wasn't driven by, abolishing slave trade. He was really someone who was driven by fame and by, monetary gain. And he saw the opportunity of finding Livingstone as his way to become famous and really then fund future expeditions. So he, in 1871, started in today's Dar es Salaam his quest to find Livingstone. In March 1871, so he went into the interior, and there were kind of vague notices of Livingstone might be somewhere on Lake Tanganyika. They're not, he's the only white person in that area in Africa, the whole of Africa at that time. And on 10th of November, there's this famous encounter in Ujiji on the shores of Lake Tanganyika, where you can see here in the image, Stanley actually encountered Livingstone, who was, had severe malaria at that time, and they met each other. And there's this famous quote of Stanley greeting Livingstone with the words, "Dr. Livingstone," I presume. Obviously, it was Dr. Livingstone. There was no other non-African white person in the whole of Africa, this part of Africa at that time. So he was successful in finding Livingstone, and that brought him fame and the ability to source more funds for another expedition now, which starts in 1874 from today's Zanzibar. And now he wanted to do the same thing that Livingstone had done, which is finding a trade route through Africa, but he went further north. Livingstone was down at the Zambezi. He started further north, and he went inland, and he was actually the first who did find Lake Victoria and did find the source of the Nile. And he tried, of course, when you are at a big lake and you see, you knew it probably flows out in the north. And he found first this river here, and he followed it. But unfortunately, that river changed course. It didn't continued north. It actually went south. So it went back into Lake Tanganyika. And then he decided, okay, let me follow the river here, the Congo River, and try to find a throughway to the Atlantic Ocean, which he managed. So he, after circumnavigating Lake Tanganyika, he followed the Congo River with you can see here a crew of 200 people. At some point, they were attacked by cannibals in what today is Congo, but he still, after 3 years, he made it to the Atlantic Ocean with half of his crew. So you can just imagine what it must have been like to cross the Africa, being attacked by cannibals, all kinds of tropical diseases. But he made it. And then you can see he went back down to Cape Town. So he had gotten his fame as well. So these are the two famous explorers. Maybe gave you a little bit of a sense of what drove them and where they went. And we are now embarking on a journey following them on their journey. And this is the journey that I will take you, which obviously I can't show you all the places where they've been, but I want to bring some of the places alive. So we will start the journey as Livingstone did in Cape Town. We'll go to the garden route where he, which was his last stop before he started his missionary quest, go into the Okavango Delta in Botswana, where he spent quite a few years. Then, follow him to the Victoria Falls, follow him down the Zambezi River to two wonderful national parks, the Lower Zambezi National Parks. And then on his next expedition, he came to what is today South Luangwa in Zambia, and then he found Lake Malawi. And then lastly, on his last expedition, we follow him to Lake Tanganyika, where Stanley found him, and then follow Stanley to Lake Victoria on his quest. And then we do a bit of a how do you call it, like an artistic deviation from the route, because we do include the Serengeti in our journey, which neither of them ever saw, but I felt it would be actually a crime to go to this part of the world and not at least bring the Serengeti a bit alive. And we ended in Bagamoyo in Zanzibar, where Livingstone's remains were actually shipped to before they were brought back to Europe. So this is the journey that I will take you on and hopefully bring Africa a bit to life through this and the places that those early explorers came through. So let's start with Cape Town. And Cape Town, you see here, some of you may have been there, is for me one of the most beautiful cities in the world, and the reason being that it's the mountain and the sea coming together. You see here the famous Table Mountain. In the background, you have the Apostles, you have Lion Head here, Signal Hill, and then this is the city bowl of Cape Town. And the beauty of Cape Town is really having the city and nature so close together. I spent about 4 months in Cape Town during COVID. It was a place where our offices were closed, and I decided, let me just spend some time in Cape Town, and I enjoyed it. If you like outdoors, you will love Cape Town. I love the outdoors. I felt a bit like a kid in a candy store there. I would get up from October to March. You have basically just sunshine every day, and you can go hiking, you can go cycling, you can go paragliding, you can go kite surfing, whatever your heart desires, it is there, because you have the ocean and the sea. Just the ocean is pretty cold, but so it's a dream for nature lovers. You can see the penguins at Boulders Beach and so many other things. It is a place to spend some time, both Cape Town and surroundings. So we'll follow Livingstone. We leave Cape Town as he did towards what is today Port Elizabeth. On the way, we'll pass the garden route as he would have done. And the garden route is a stunningly beautiful place. And it's similar to Cape Town. It's the ocean meeting the mountains. This is Wilderness, I believe, which is one of the places on the garden route. And you see the beauty, the endless beaches, the ocean there. And you can do long beach walks. You can swim. The water is warmer here than in Cape Town, or you can just go inland, go do hiking, cycling, whatever you want. It is a hiking paradise. A lot of rocky outcrops. You can do multi-day hikes or just short hikes, whatever you want. It is just a beautiful place to explore. It's a beautiful place also to explore with family. If you have kids, there are many places, many attractions for kids. And then, again, going back to Livingstone, this was the last place where he saw the ocean, and then he ventured inland through, South Africa and then into Botswana, and he spent quite some time in what today is what was then already, but what today is called the Okavango Delta. And the Okavango Delta is a bit of a mystery, too many, but it's basically floodplains in a desert. And this is one of the amazing experiences you can have in the Okavango Delta. It's there's wonderful wildlife there, but also just wonderful nature experiences. And what happens is it's the Kalahari Desert that once a year is flooded by a flood wave that comes from the Angolan highlands. The rains in Angola are from December into February, and then so from February onwards, there's a flood wave coming down the mountains and into the Kalahari Desert. And from March, April onwards, the water will rise, and then the peak of the water will happen in May, and then it will gradually subside until the cycle again develops. And the result of this, you have quite unique experience. You have basically lagoons of water that are still. It's not a flowing river, and you can do this. Is a quite unique experience. It's what we call a Mokoro safari, where you essentially, it's like being in Venice in a gondola. So you just sit there and someone pulls you behind you. And as you do this, you will experience an incredible sense of peace. And I've experienced it a few times, and I can relate to what this lady is looking at. You can see she's looking at something down here. We can't see it. But I remember once being in a Mokoro, just gliding through the lagoon, you know, seeing the sunset or the sun coming down. We were heading to a little island where we were planning to have a sundowner. And then on either side of the Mokoro, of this wooden boat, there were little lilies, water lilies. And I remember gliding past one of them and seeing what maybe this lady sees here, a little frog who was clinging onto the water lily. And for a moment, we were part of this frog's life and this frog's world. And I remember just looking at the frog, being mesmerized by that sense of stillness and just peace, clinging onto the water, the lily. And then we glided off, and the frog stayed behind. But today, 15, 16 years later, I still remember this frog, and you will probably too, if you do this. And there are many other things you can do. Of course, you can go on game drives, you can go on walking safaris. There's great horse riding in the Okavango Delta, and you see here in the rainy season, you might even after the floods come, it actually doesn't really rain there, but you might even horse ride through water areas. So there are beautiful wildlife encounters, but also stunningly beautiful scenery. I don't know if Livingstone really appreciated that, but surely he made use of the wildlife for his food. And then he continued and on his journey past the Victoria Falls, as we have heard earlier. And this is really the Victoria Falls. It's the biggest waterfalls in the world. Absolutely spectacular. And I just mentioned the flood wave coming down from Angola and flooding the Okavango Delta. It also makes all the rivers rise, and therefore March, April, May is when the rivers are highest, and therefore also the highest water levels are coming down Victoria Falls. This is what you see this is what Victoria Falls are like in March to May, when the water is really at its highest. You can see here little trails. This is the Zimbabwean side. Here's the gorge where the Zambezi River continues to flow after it fell down the falls. On this side here, you have Zambia. So this is the border. In fact, the middle of the river is the border between Zambia and Zimbabwe. And on either side, you have trails. And you can walk here and you just face the river. It's a beautiful trail. Even here, you can see a little trail. You can see people here. In March, April, May, the river is the water is so high, there's a backlash when the water comes down, it comes back up. And you see that here, the mist that comes up. When you're down here, you will be drenched. And you will possibly not even see the falls because you're just in the mist of the water. And therefore, one way of seeing the falls at this time of the year is just going into the air, into a helicopter or into a hang glider, and just seeing it from the air and seeing the spectacular size and force of Victoria Falls. And it's not always like this. And if you come in November, December, you would believe the next picture. This is what it looks like. And now this is like the end of the dry season. You're in November, December. The rains in this part of the world are in December, January, February. So it's been dry season for 5-6 months. And this is what you have left of Victoria Falls. If you compare that, I think the factor is about 20. So the volume of water in March to May is 20 times higher than in November, December. So if you really want to see the magnificent force of Victoria Falls, don't go in November, December. There are many other reasons why you might want to go there, but not to see Victoria Falls, because it's a little trickle compared to the falls that you have. Clearly, Livingstone saw it at a different time. I think it said somewhere earlier when he went. I'm just going back when he saw them. Oh no, I'm going a long way back. This is probably too much, but he saw them clearly when they were very full. And he continued then down the Zambezi River. And the Zambezi River is a wonderful place to explore today. It has a lot of rapids, so it wasn't great for commerce, which was really his main purpose, but it's great for safari. This is what you can see today. This is an aerial view of the Zambezi River. And remember, the Zambezi River is the border between Zambia, which is here on the northern side, and Zimbabwe on the southern side. And there are two wonderful national parks here, and they're facing each other. On the Zambian side, you have Lower Zambezi, and on the Zimbabwean side, you have Mana Pools. Both of them are spectacular wildlife areas, and I'm just bringing it a bit to life what you can do here. You can do water-based safaris, and they're very different water-based safaris than the Okavango Delta. Remember I said in the Okavango Delta, you have still water, lagoons where there's basically no movement. Here you are on a major river that flows very fast. And as you basically just go down river on a canoe, you can also do a boat safari, go upriver. And as you go down, you will see lots of wildlife. You see elephants, of course, you'll see hippos, everything else that is on the shore of the river. You can do multi-day canoeing safaris and just camp on an island if you're adventurous, or you just enjoy luxury. There are luxury lodges along the river. And, you know, this is a sunset over the Zambezi, which is probably one of the most spectacular sunsets you can possibly ever see if you're at this camp. And there are many other beautiful experiences. You can do game drives, of course. You can do walking safaris. So it's a beautiful place to go on safari. And Livingstone then also came to another place, which then, of course, wasn't a national park, but today is, and that's South Luangwa in Zambia. And it's one of my favorite national parks in Africa. And the reason is that you can do amazing walking safaris there, or bushwalks. South Luangwa labels itself as the home of walking safari, and quite rightfully so. This is where walking safaris were first practiced. You have probably the best guides. African walking guides are here because they have trained these guides for 50 or more years. And what is special about South Luangwa, you have small camps, really small camps, maybe just 3 or 4 chalets in the wild that are set up in walking distance from each other every day. And the way you do it, you get up in the morning, have breakfast, maybe roasted over an open fire, you have a hot shower, and then you head out with your guide and you walk up close to wildlife. And that's a magical experience. And I want to bring this alive with an experience that I had many, many years ago on a walking safari. And I remember, and sometimes you can combine it, a game drive and a walking safari. We were on a game drive with an expert guide, came around the corner, and we saw in the distance some elephants. And I remember the guide asking us, "You want to walk up close to the elephants? I have a gun. I can read the animals. I know we'll be safe." And we said, "Yes, of course, we'd like to do this." And so we just stopped the car, got out, and then he said, "You know, the elephants are there. The wind comes from there, so we have to walk against the wind because elephants have a very poor eyesight, so they won't see us, but they will smell us if the wind comes from us to them. So we have to go against the wind," which is what we did. And he said, "Let's go over there, because if we go there, they are walking that direction. Then we can just see them from that bush over there. They will just pass it from there." So we did that. It's maybe 100 meters we walked there, and the elephants came as well. They didn't see us. We were crouching down, and then we were at these bushes, and the elephants came. And at some point, they were less than 10 meters away. We could see them through the bush. There wasn't a dense bush. We could see them. There was a a big mama, there was a tiny baby, and there was some adolescents, maybe 5, 6 elephants. And then our guide told us, he was whispering and said, you know, the wind is coming from there. They're walking this direction. And as they continue walking, in a moment, they will be downwind from us. So they will smell us. So just stay calm. And, you know, 10, 20 seconds later, suddenly the mother elephant, huge, the head went up from grazing, the head went up, the trunk went up, the head went towards us. We were there, was looking at us, the ears flapped wide open. So she knew there's someone, there's a human there, or there are humans there. And she was trying to figure out who are they. She couldn't see us. We were on the other side of the bush, but she could smell us, and she would try to hear us with her ears and smell us with her trunk. And after maybe another 10, 20 seconds, she relaxed. So she realized there is someone, but they are not any threat to us. So they just continued walking. And as you can sense from my excitement, that is probably 15, 16 years ago, that is just like yesterday for me. And if you ever experience something like this, it will just remain in your memory. You can see 1,000 elephants from a vehicle, and you'll be happy to see them. But once you encounter them on foot, basically on their terrain, on their terms, it is a whole different experience. And you don't have to be as adventurous. Maybe just walk up to a giraffe or to a group of zebra, and you'll have just the same experience. It's a wonderful experience. And there are many places in Africa we can experience that, but South Luangwa is definitely one of them. And yeah, I hope you get to experience it someday if that's something that you're interested in. So, and you have wonderful experiences in the wild. You can have just bush dinners in the middle of nowhere. You can see here, that's probably the camp, a few lights here, and then just in a dry riverbed, you know, they set up a bush dinner, and just imagine the experience of having the dinner under the stars here after a day of walking. So Livingstone probably experienced that as well without the luxury of a hot shower, which you have. And then he continued his journey. Remember, he's trying to find a trade route. And on this journey, he came to Lake Malawi. And Lake Malawi is quite special. It's, in my view, one of the most beautiful lakes in Africa, together with Lake Tanganyika. It's a pristine, clear lake. And you can just relax on the shores. There are some stunning beaches. This is actually the Mozambicans. Lake Malawi has on the one side Malawi, on the other hand Mozambique. And this is a place on the Mozambican side of the lake, and this beach is called Mkwichi. The reason why it's called Mkwichi is because that's the sound that you will hear when you walk over the sand, because the sand is so soft and it's pure white. So you can just relax here. There's just one small lodge here, or you can explore the area behind. There's a conservation area behind, not many animals, but great walks. Or you can go on the water and just do a canoeing or kayaking safari, or you can just snorkel. There's beautiful snorkeling here as well on Lake Malawi. Or you can just visit a small village. That's a picture that I took many years ago, and just have encounters far away from the tourism path, because there's not many travelers coming to this part of the world. It's still today a little bit of an explorer's place, where we're far away from the beaten tourist path. But you still have the luxury. There are some small boutique lodges, some of them are luxury, and you will have a wonderful sundowner on the lake after a beautiful day at the beach or in the bush here. So Livingstone certainly didn't have that luxury. He ended his journey here in Zanzibar, and then embarked on his last journey, the source of finding the source of the Nile, which we heard he didn't find, but he made it to Lake Tanganyika. And Lake Tanganyika is probably the most spectacular lake. It's not as clear as Lake Malawi, but it has these high mountains. They're called the Mahala Mountains. There's one incredible lodge here called Greystoke, just at the shores of Lake Tanganyika, and at the foot of these mountains. And what makes these mountains, apart from their natural beauty, particularly interesting, is that they have chimpanzees in the wild. So it's one of the few places where you can actually see our closest relatives in the wild. You have to be quite fit to see them. They might move up there. They will move up and down the mountain, and they actually move quite fast. So if you want to see them, It's not like a gorilla trekking where it's very easy to find them in an hour, so you might actually really be hiking a whole day, but the reward is incredible if you find them just in the wild, where very few people ever get to see them. So that's Lake Tanganyika, and we heard this is really not given to Livingstone, but Lake Victoria was found by Stanley, who also found Livingstone on his first expedition. On a later expedition, he now found Lake Victoria and found the source of the Nile. So I want to show you a little bit what Lake Victoria is like. And Lake Victoria, quite frankly, is not as spectacular as Lake Malawi and Lake Tanganyika. It is the largest lake in Africa, though, and it has very different sides to it. This is the Kenyan side. There it's a bit hillier. On the Ugandan side, it is flatter, but it's still very interesting to get a glimpse of local life. If you're interested in cultural encounters, the Lake Victoria, you can see little fishing villages. You can even go on a fishing trip with a local fisherman. So from a cultural perspective, it is very attractive, but not as much from a scenic and natural beauty perspective or wildlife perspective as Lake Malawi and Lake Tanganyika are. But you're close to the Serengeti. And this is what neither Livingstone nor Stanley saw, but I want to just share with you from Lake Victoria. It's actually an hour and a half into the Western Serengeti. And the Serengeti is probably the most spectacular game reserve in the whole of Africa. It is where you can see literally everything that you ever hope to see, you know, the cats, the lions, the leopards, you know, the elephants, huge elephants, small elephants. You have the Great Migration the whole year round, which also goes into Kenya, but you have it in the Serengeti, where you see these incredible crossings over the Mara River, you know, where there's thousands of wildebeest will just, you know, manically jump in the river and are met, if they're unlucky, by these huge Nile crocodiles. So if you're sitting at the edge of the river in your vehicle here and you just observe it, you will inevitably, you know, take sights. So probably root for the wildebeest. What happens in most cases, these Nile crocodiles are waiting for them, and they will just slowly approach them. And if you watch it, you can see in a moment it will just grab one, and that's what then happens here. And the way they try to kill the wildebeest is just by drowning them. So they will pull them in the middle of the river where it's steepest, and then they will pull it down, and then you will see a struggle. You know, the wildebeest disappears, and you wonder what happened now, and then suddenly it comes up, tries to gain some air, is pulled down again, and it's sometimes it's over minutes, that struggle. And in most cases, the crocodile will win because it's so much stronger and bigger. Sometimes the wildebeest will struggle free, swim to the edge of the river and struggle out, and then continue its journey, maybe sometimes with a broken leg. So that's just raw nature, but it's one of the most spectacular wildlife encounters that you can possibly have. So that was the journey that Livingstone and Stanley took. Some of the places with a bit of artistic freedom, throwing in the Serengeti. And I want to bring a bit to life what it is like to be on safari. Of course, we talked about you couldn't go on a game drive, you go on a walking safari. You can also go on a balloon safari, especially during migration time. That's a wonderful thing to do because you see these huge herds from the air, and you see the beautiful landscapes, these endless plains of the Serengeti and the Masai Mara, which is the part of the same ecosystem. And you will have amazing safari camps. They can be very rustic, like this one here, where you're just literally have a living room in the bush. You know, you basically are here. You have on sand, but it's still extremely cozy at night. You'll have a fireplace outside where you just have your drink outside, or you can have luxury. You know, this is one of our preferred camps in the central Serengeti, where you have everything you could ever want. You know, a very comfortable bed, a proper shower, bathroom facilities. You have a sitting area, and just between safaris, before and after safaris, just relax and enjoy with a book, or just look out and enjoy the beauty of the scenery. Maybe even have a bath with a view. Imagine just sitting there looking out. Maybe a group of wildebeest will just pass by as you do that, or an elephant will stroll by, and you'll never forget that bath that you have here. And the days start typically with a cup of tea or coffee or whatever you prefer. Typically, your camp manager or your guide will ask you in the evening, what time would you like to be woken up in the morning? What time would you like to start? Typically, you start your day very early with sunrise. So maybe at 5:30, 6 o'clock, someone will knock at your door and bring you whatever you ask for. A cup of tea, coffee, hot chocolate, some cookies, and then you sit there in front of your tent. Imagine this place. You just sit here in the morning with your tea or coffee. The light comes up. You see maybe a beautiful sunrise. You can hear the nature awakening, starting with the birds, and then animals will start to move around, and you just sit there and you feel Africa awakening, and you're part of it. And a safari day out there in the wild is waiting for me. There's probably no more beautiful morning coffee than you can ever have than here. Then you go on safari, and maybe you are surprised in the middle of the savannah with a bush breakfast. Someone, another part of the crew will have gone ahead, set up a table, maybe even set up a cooking station where they cook, fresh eggs for you. You'll have fresh fruit, fresh juice. And again, probably never have a breakfast that tastes as yummy as this, simply because the location is so extraordinary. And you continue your day, and then maybe conclude your day with a beautiful sundowner somewhere, or a dinner, very likely dinner in the bush. Imagine here the romance of being here and surrounded by lanterns, reflecting on that day on safari, everything you've seen. You hear the sounds of the night. You hear the lions roar, the hyena screech, the elephant's trumpet. But of course, you're safe because you're surrounded. There will be some askaris who'll just be a few meters from camp, but you still feel you're having a dinner in the bush, and you feel like the only people in the world. This is a stunningly beautiful experience. These are the memories that you'll bring home, and that probably will make you want to go back. Those of you who've been in Africa will probably relate to that. So this is hopefully a glimpse of what it's like to go on safari, and to cap it all off, you might just have a night under the stars. This is one of the star beds in Kenya, but you have them in other parts of Africa as well. In some places you have lodges that have a big veranda, and when it's dry, their beds have rolls. So when it's dry and you can tell it's going to be dry overnight, they will just roll the bed outside, and then you just sleep under a mosquito net, and you will see the stars, and they are very clear here in Africa because there's no light pollution. There's no pollution in general. So you will just sleep under the stars, and you hear the sound of the night, and then you wake up and you'll see the first light of the day, the red, orange, and then it becomes yellow until eventually the sun will come up. And again, now someone will knock at your door and bring you a coffee or tea, and another day on safari has passed. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you got a glimpse, or you learned a bit about Stanley and Livingstone, and the places where they came, and where they went, and what it's like there today, and what it's like to be on safari. And yeah, I hope to maybe even see you someday in Africa, maybe even host you at my place here. Thank you very much. Over to you, Emily.
Yes, thank you, Florian, for all of the wonderful history and the great travel tips. That was super, super captivating and inspiring. So thank you so much for sharing all of that. We will now move into our Q&A session. So if you have any questions for Florian, go ahead and pop them into the chat. We'll get to as many as we can. I'm also going to launch one final poll here in Zoom. We would be very grateful for your response on this poll. So please do take a moment and fill it out. All right, and thank you for all of your kind comments in the chat as well. All right, Florian, first question. When is the best time to travel to the presented destinations?
All right, so the answer is differentiated. It really depends on which parts of Africa. And let me take you again through on this journey, and then highlight where for each of these places, what would be the best time. So starting in Cape Town and the Garden Route, the best time clearly is October to March. That's the summer month when you have long days. It's generally sunny, and and dry, and you have long days, so you have a lot of time to explore. From April onwards until September, you have the winter season. Days are shorter. It gets quite chilly, and especially there are lots of rain fronts coming through, so it can be quite wet. So definitely October to March. When you then go into the Botswana, Victoria Falls area, Zambia, Zimbabwe, that inland area, you have a different weather patterns. There the rains are in our winter months from December to February. The best wildlife viewing there is from probably May through to October. So it's the opposite now. Yeah, and there's a bit of overlap. April is already a good wildlife viewing month, and it's dry. May, definitely. June, very good. And then we get quite cold, because the opposite of Europe. So in June, July, or August, it can get quite cold at night, and it gets then very hot. If you are very heat sensitive, October, November in Botswana, Zambia, Zimbabwe is not the time to see it. So it's an all-year destination, but maybe avoid December, January, February, because it can be quite wet. You go for the first time. On the flip side, it's great for bird watching, great for just spectacular nature view vistas with incredible thunderstorms that you could never imagine exist. You then continue towards East Africa. Now Malawi, Tanzania, Kenya, they are really all year round destinations. But then we have two rainy seasons. We're currently in one of them. So November to early December is our short rains in East Africa. And then you have April, May to early June, it's the long rains. In between, it's dry. And you'll see, but I would actually say you can visit East Africa any time of the year. My mom used to come in April, November. It was off season, hardly anyone traveling, very affordable lodges, and it's beautifully green. And you may have a tropical thunderstorm every other day. Before and after, it's sunny. She tremendously enjoyed it. I tremendously enjoyed traveling with her. Maybe not the first time. First time you come to East Africa, rather travel in the dry season, which should be late December into March, or maybe from late June into October. That would be the ideal season for East Africa. I hope that was not too much, but back to you, Emily.
Great tips, Florian. Thank you so much for all of the expert insight that you have to provide. It's awesome. All right, our attendees want to know, Florian, what is your favorite country in Africa and why?
So, the location where I am will probably give you a hint, which that is, and that is Kenya. It is Kenya, and that doesn't mean that the other countries aren't wonderful. And I've traveled the whole of East and Southern Africa. In 2010, I drove from Nairobi to South Africa to the Football World Cup and explored for 3 months the whole of Africa. And there's beautiful places everywhere. What I particularly like about Kenya, and I would say to some degree also Tanzania, is that Kenya has it all. And when I say all, it has the wildlife, and really incredible wildlife. It has stunning landscapes. It has the tropical Indian Ocean beach, and it has a lot of authentic still cultural encounters. And so it's really anything that you can be as active as you want. Whatever you want to do, you can do it here. And it has beautiful and very diverse lodges and safari experiences. So anything you could possibly want is you can do here. There's one exception, that is water-based safaris. That is not really as great in Kenya. If you want to do a water-based safari, you definitely want to go to Botswana or Zambia, Zimbabwe, or maybe southern Tanzania. If you wanted to do a self-drive journey, then rather go to South Africa or Namibia. But then South Africa and Namibia doesn't quite have the same wildlife as Kenya, Tanzania. Doesn't have quite the cultural encounters. It's very westernized already. And it doesn't have the tropical beaches. It has beautiful beaches, but not tropical. If you want to go in Cape Town into the water, it's almost like going in Europe in winter. Yeah, it's the water temperature in the middle of summer in Cape Town. I've done it once and I couldn't believe it was like 12 or 13 degrees. If you go further east away from the Cape, it gets warmer. But even if you go at the Garden Route, you're probably now at 19, 20 degrees. So it's not like East Africa where you are at 25 to 30 degrees all year round. Yeah. So that's why I'd say if you ever only go to one country, Of course, it depends on what you want, but if you want a diverse set of experience, see a lot of wildlife, spend a bit of time at the beach, maybe get a glimpse of African everyday life, then Kenya is a great choice.
Awesome. Thank you, Florian. Speaking of the beach, we have a beach-related question in the chat. Often, if you go to Tanzania on safari, it's suggested that you combine it with a visit to Zanzibar. If I am not a beach person, what does Zanzibar have to offer?
Yeah. So, I mean, if it has cultural, interesting cultural glimpses. So, you have the, century-old trade routes along the East African coast connecting over to Arabia and into India. And there are a lot of remnants of that. So, Zanzibar, the old stone town of Zanzibar, is a place where you can wander around and explore. And there are other places in East Africa that can do that. Of course, you also have the spices of Zanzibar. You can visit a spice plantation. So it's the culture and that the agriculture probably. But I would say if you're really not a beach person, then I would probably question whether Zanzibar is the place you'd want. If you have a strong cultural interest, then potentially. If your main interest is around wildlife and nature, then probably skip Zanzibar.
Fantastic, Florian. And alternatively, for people who are beach people, where would you recommend as the best place to go to relax on a beach after safari?
Yeah. So I would say I would classify it a bit as kind of the traditional picture postcard beaches. And that would be definitely Zanzibar, but it's also the Kenyan coast, especially southern Kenya, but also central Kenyan coast, where you have just endless beaches and virtually no one. Because there are a couple of hotspots. Mombasa is very famous. There are lots of people going there, but once you get away from it, you can just walk for an hour and hardly meet anyone there. So that's Kenya, Tanzania, if you want. But then there are kind of the off the beaten path places as well. You have some offshore islands, and they're basically all over along the East African coast. You have offshore islands in Kenya, you have offshore islands in Tanzania, and then you have beautiful islands in Mozambique as well. So Mozambique is also a beautiful beach destination, especially central Mozambique. There's the Bazaruta archipelago, which are relatively large islands with dunes, stunning colors. And then you have northern Mozambique. You have the Karimba Islands, which is like Maldives, just not known. No one really goes there, but it's a bit harder to get there. Yeah, so that's also, do you want to spend a bit of time and travel to the beach, or do you just want to have a 45-minute hop and you're at a beach? So, but if kind of probably for most people, it would be the classic kind of Zanzibar and Kenyan coast. But if you want to get off the beaten path, we can suggest many beautiful places, or even Lake Malawi that I described is a beautiful place as well.
Lovely. Thanks, Florian. We'll take one or two more questions here. Florian, you talked a little bit about big cats. If someone really wants to see lions, where would you recommend as a destination to give them the best chance of that? Yeah.
So the first place that comes to mind is really the Serengeti and the Masai Mara. I've never, and the Masai Mara here if I hop in my car out here now, I'll be in the Masai Mara in 3.5 hours from Nairobi. So I go once or twice a year, and I do not remember a time going to the Masai Mara where I didn't see lions. And it's more the question like, how many and how big of prides do you look at? And there are prides of 20, 30, 40 lions. You see the biggest prides of lions you actually have in Ruaha National Park in southern Tanzania. You can have prides of lions of up to 60 there. So Kenya, Tanzania, and many places, just mentioned Ruaha, but many places you see lions. But there are many other places. For example, Kruger National Park and the adjacent, Sabi Sands Game Reserve, you're virtually guaranteed to visit lions. So if your interest is more around seeing Cape Town, doing a self-drive journey through Cape Town, but then also seeing some wildlife, you'd probably combine it with Kruger National Park, and you will see great lion sightings there. You have great leopard sightings there. You'd see the big five. You see buffalo. You see elephant, you see rhino there as well. So many places, but if you want to really have the sense of being in the wild, then nothing beats East Africa. It just feels wilder than South Africa.
Awesome. Florian, speaking of Cape Town and wildlife, can you see the penguins on Boulder Beach year-round in Cape Town?
I believe so. Yeah, I have seen them twice, but quite frankly, I couldn't say 100% they'll be there all year round. I would have to actually double check, but my perception is they are there all the time. And the like 2 times I was there, different times of the year they were there. But I would have to actually go back into Google and ask that question, whether they are all year round there.
Awesome, Florian. Well, thank you so much for all of the great responses to these questions from our attendees. We have reached the end of our webinar experience. Thank you all again so much for taking the time out of your night to join us. Please do keep an eye on our website for upcoming webinar opportunities. And lastly, we would love your input on the survey that will populate as you leave the Zoom meeting. If you are interested in traveling with us and you have opted into being contacted by our experts to chat further, please do go ahead and leave your phone number in the survey form so that we can best get in touch with you. And then lastly, as social manager, I would love your follow on Instagram. So if you'd like some visual inspiration for your next vacation, your next holiday, feel free to give us a follow and check us out. Thank you again for your time. Thank you, Florian, and have a wonderful rest of your evening, everyone.
Yeah, thank you from my side as well. One thing that I would like to actually just close off with is I do host every now and then guests who come and visit us. And I enjoy meeting our guests. So if you decide to come to Kenya and I happen to be here, maybe I would meet you here in person. For those of you who send us an inquiry right now, I would actually, some of those I'm happily take on myself and be your travel consultant if you send us an inquiry. So I look forward to interacting with you and maybe seeing you in Africa. Thank you very much for your time. Have a good evening. Bye-bye, everyone.